You beautiful rapscallions, here we meet again. Just another gin joint in Orange County. Hell, we don't even serve gin, do we? Well, I'm not going to do much except welcome one of the greatest orchestras that any of us have ever heard or been associated with. You know, I thought during the sound check they were really ugly, but they were in the dark. They're really very pretty, aren't they? They're very handsome, but scary as hell to turn around, you know. Donnie McCaslin there, of course, has had 3 Grammy nominations, and he's part of the inner circle of the Grammy music thing. That's Donnie McCaslin. I just happen to love him a great deal, and his dad, too. Without further ado, we are in the company not only of a great band, and I'm so glad you're here. They deserve to have a loving audience like you. We are in the company of one of the sweetest people, one of the most brilliant composers and arranger. She has put this orchestra together and kept it going for almost 3 decades. She's too young to have done that. She's still absolutely in the bloom of perfect youth. Welcome, my friend and yours, the incomparable Maria Schneider. My buddy and yours, Maria Schneider. Is that you? Maria Schneider, you are like no one else I've ever met in the world of music as an amazing human being. And I imagine you know, but I think you defend yourself against knowing this, how much everybody who knows you and has heard your music adores you and what you do. I mean, it's as if the person and the music are the same thing. It's a very unusual thing, Maria. And you have that wonderful vibe that people zero in on. Can you feel the way people love you out in the audience on occasion?
Well, I feel that they respond to the music, but the other component, and you can't, minimize that, is these 18 insanely talented musicians that also have these storytelling capabilities and this very, this drive for perfection, whether it's the pitch in the ensemble or the sense of sound, or it's the improvisation, or pushing the limits with comping, or, they all are doing so many creative things. You know, sometimes jazz is sort of, you know, it's powerful and it's intriguing and it's moving, but sometimes it's missing all that subtlety.
The coloratura.
Yeah, it's like organza, you know, or something in sound. And then Bob Brookmeyer, I found compelling because the elements he brought from classical music were different. That was form. Yes. Because most jazz is theme and variations.
Pretty
you
much.
Have a tune, and then everybody blows on the tune.
That's right. ABBA.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, not just ABBA, because that's the song, but then the form of the arrangement is the tune, and then people solo on the tune, and in a big band, maybe there's a sax solo on the tune. It's this harmonic structure that cycles around again and again, and that's why I say it's theme and variations. But all of a sudden, Bob Brookmeyer came along, and he's writing these epic pieces that have this long-form composition that's like classical music. Jerry Versace. That piece was, I would say, largely influenced by Brazilian music, the harmony and various aspects about it. And we're going to play another piece that was also influenced by Brazilian music. It's called Choro Dançado. It has a similar characteristic beat, the little off beats, and then a lot of counterpoint. And this is going to feature Rich Perry.
You said you have insanely gifted musicians. They're both gifted and insane in some way. It's the way they push themselves. And that's just a beautiful thing.
Oh yeah, they're all, you know, so hard on themselves. I mean, that's part of it.
Look at Donnie.
Everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all just constantly dissatisfied or wishing they could do better, and it's unhealthy, but it also is what makes them so great,
Well,
probably.
It's true.
It's trying to find that balance of doing that to the point where you don't destroy yourself with that kind of negative talk.
Absolutely.
And using it to make you great, you know. But I hope they feel in moments how great they are. Perry. Also Frank Kimbrough. So we're going to play a new piece now. This is a new piece that we're breaking in. And let's see, just to give a little background on this, in recent years I've become more and more concerned about the digital world, especially as it's affecting musicians and copyright and everything that you read about and probably know about. And, but then there's this other aspect that has more increasingly been getting under my skin, and now I'm reading, it feels like the world is waking up a little bit to it, and that's this idea that as we're going on Google and doing searches and everything, that all our information is we're being followed and we're being watched, and everything we do is being used and monetized and turned into something, and making one company an incredibly powerful company, the most powerful company in the world, maybe the most powerful force in the world, because they own all the information about everybody in the world. They have more cash than the United States government. So it's a little bit scary. And this artificial intelligence that slowly this world is creating, there's something called the moment of singularity. Do any of you know about that? The point in time in which they predict around 2035 that artificial intelligence will go over the point of becoming more intelligent than we are. And there are different lines of thought about this. One is that at that point, we won't have to do anything. Machines will do it all. They'll be smarter than us, and this will just be like utopia. But there's other people, and pretty smart people like Stephen Hawking, that say the opposite is going to happen, that it's going to become more intelligent than we are, and it's going to turn on us and destroy us. And we won't be able to evolve fast enough to get ahead of it. So that's a bummer and a downer, and I don't mean to take you down, but I just have to give you a little background to this piece so you understand why you're hearing what you're hearing. So these people that control big data, I call them data lords. So this piece is called Data Lords, and you're going to hear from Mike Rodriguez on trumpet and then Dave Pietro on alto.
Your music floats. It doesn't seem to be rationally scripted. It doesn't seem to be predictable. It seems to organically come from a person who's walking or sleeping or dreaming or reverie. You have this infinite quality of cloud floating.
Well, it's to get that thing where the music becomes its own body, like an organism. You know, it's not something you wrote. Do you know how hard that is?
Believe me.
It's not, you sweat, you know, it's not like, you know, you have the ability to, no, you sit your ass in the chair long enough and you with the negative talk to yourself and the procrastination cleaning the sock drawer, and then, wow, that freezer really needs defrosting, and it's the running away and then hating yourself because you ran away from it another day, and you sit down and, you know, it's the hardest thing.
You cannot will that music. It's not deliberative. You have to discover that music.
Well, you have to work it. It's a combination. It's a combination because you have to sit there and do the work, but you have to do the work always trying to imagine this kind of sort of inevitability.
This is the Giz. This be the Giz. Greg Gisbert, you are a very special player, and I suspect you don't go to bed at night saying to yourself, I'm a very special player. The way in which I have heard you on multiple occasions over many years with this band, without, I think, trying to do it or even maybe having Maria assign it, although I'm not sure of that, you ground that band. There's something about not just your tone and your chops, but something about, how do I want to put, you have an almost, excuse me, I mean this as an absolute compliment, you have a childlike authority. It's as if your innocence precedes you. Seriously, there's nothing in your playing that seems calculated or monstrous or needfully aggressive. Somehow, when you play, it seems as if you're making love to the world.
When Maria started her band back when it was a co-led band
Sure.
with John Fedchuk,
Sure.
I was in there at the very ground floor. I think I came in the second or third gig that they had. And then when they decided to have their own bands, right about that time, we were playing Visiones. I think we started in
Well, I recorded you guys twice then.
Yes, okay, so yeah, and I remember those 2.5, 3 hour sets we used to do. They were awesome. Those were amazing. But I remember I moved to New York to be a soloist and a jazz trumpet player, and Maria Schneider had mentioned we'd had people coming in, great trumpet players, heroes, you know. And but Maria had something new, a new sound. So for, like you said, there's an innocence about it, I think, especially for at least the way the brass and the trumpet section sounds, because there's 4 core members that have been there pretty much since the beginning, and that's a bass trombonist George Flynn, and lead trombonist Keith O'Quinn, and Tony Cadlick was playing first trumpet, and he still does when we're in New York and when we do bus tours and whatnot. And I played second to Tony, and Maria had asked me to play lead when Tony wasn't there, so I told her I'm not a lead player, and she said, well, will you do it for me? And so of course, you know, do the best I can. I'll try my best, but we had the benefit of not having to try like anybody else, try to play like anybody else, try to play in a style of anybody else. All we had to do was use our own musical sensibilities.
Yes.
So in that regard, it's really neat to be on the ground floor of something that 30 years later has turned into like a whole thing where people say, you know, do that Maria thing, that Maria phrasing. And to think it's something that, that started at Visiones.
This is the title piece from our new album. It's called The Thompson Fields, and just to give you a little background on the Thompson farm. So Windham, Minnesota is very small. When I was growing up, it was 3,666 people, which made a lot of people in Windham, Minnesota nervous. That's 666. And it was a really great place, and it still is. And when I go back there, there's still this tremendous sense of community. And the Thompson farm is a farm that I loved as a kid. Our families were closest friends. They had this beautiful farm, and it was mostly beautiful because they had preserved through generations of their family native prairie, which is so rare, you know. When they started the ethanol thing, everybody took every last, you know, inch of land and put it into corn production. But this family said, no, we're keeping our beautiful native prairie, so the bobolinks and the meadowlarks and the monarchs and all the native plants and everything, many things that are endangered, thrive in those areas. And then also wetlands. There are a lot of areas they didn't drain. And so I go back there every other year for an agroecology summit. And when I was writing this piece, I went up to the top of the silo with the oldest, or the second oldest son, Tony Thompson, and we climbed up the silo the day before the summit started. And we were looking over their bean fields, and the wind was just, it was making these green, deep green leaves just wave in the wind, you know. It was like watching the water or something. And we were talking about our families and people that had passed, and, you know, the sense of community there, and just memories and all sorts of things. And so I ended up capturing that in this piece. And so there are two solos on this. The first is Frank Kimbrough on piano. His section, you'll hear those waves of green in the horns, and Frank is the stories, you know, just blowing in the wind, the memories, the collective, you know, the web. You look out and it looks like there's nothing, but I promise you there's so much there, so much community. And then you're going to hear Lage Lund on the end on guitar, the Thompson Fields.
What is her essential magical ingredient? She has so many things: intelligence and melodic, and, you know, Evans and Gil Evans and Bruckmeyer. But there's something in her intrinsically that makes her utterly unique, like no one else. What is that?
Well, I've watched a lot of it come into fruition, but she talked about that very thing when we played in her hometown of Windham, Minnesota. I can't remember the year. We've been there twice, but the first time we played there, she knew everybody in that auditorium, and the tears were flowing. We couldn't, I kind of feel it just thinking back, you know, that it was overwhelming, the joy and love. And she could barely get the words out, but she had told the audience that when she first started playing the clarinet and was on that stage, and when she was trying to first write music, was on that stage, and when she was taking piano lessons, her piano teacher was in the audience, and her dream was to someday have her own band and play on that stage. Not Carnegie Hall, not all over the world, but Windham, Minnesota public school stage.
Sure.
And it's like, I always think of, in architecture, Gaudi, how those buildings, they feel like they can breathe.
The Barcelona buildings, yeah.
Yeah, it's not just, 90-degree corners and windows. Everything has, but an insane amount of engineering went in to create that. It's not like they just said, oh, let's just make a curvy wall here. Oh, cool, you know what I mean? Same thing in music. You can't just make a curvy wall in the music. You have to build that so that it just feels like it breathes.
Yes.
But there's a lot of construction and planning to go under that goes into that. It's like I was just talking to Steve Armour here, who's doing, he was a musician and then he studied now screenwriting, and we were talking about creating story and inevitability and surprise and finding that space between giving the expected, but then the surprises, that feel inevitable, and always playing these things with each other so that you have something that's compelling. And in the end, what you want is you want the audience to trust you. Exactly. You want the audience to not be analyzing and thinking, but before they know it, they're like mesmerized. Right. They trust and they just give and they release and just listen to the music because they trust you. That's what you want. That's not easy. Lage Lund, Frank Kimbrough.
Frank Kimbrough.
How you doing, Jim?
You're a wonderful pianist, and I'm thrilled you're here. You are a pianist in a tradition that almost doesn't have a name in my book. You're what I call one of the truly lyrical pianists. You seem to be very much in touch with the magnificent river of romance and beauty. Talk to me about how right or wrong or not even close I am, because that's how I hear you.
No, I think you are close. I came up as a kid, playing classical music and hearing a lot of choral music because I grew up in the church, so I was a church organist for 6 years by the time I graduated high school.
You and Jimmy McGriff.
So I did that. I played for the chorus in school, and actually, I find that to find the sort of, even though the piano it's not vocal in nature like a horn could be, but to look for that sound, is to get a singing tone out of the piano is something that I worked many years to try to get to.
There are many elements, and I don't want you to get too crazy with analysis or intellectual critique, but when you talk about a singing tone, obviously it has to do with melodic flow, but it also has to do with harmonic, narratives and delicacy. Can you talk a little bit about just that songful quality?
Well, I think all music comes from song, right?
Okay.
And I think, not to sound like an old crusty dude, but I think a lot of the music that's happening these days has lost touch with that.
Yes.
And, I hear a lot of clever music. I hear a lot of very complicated music. I hear a lot of very, simplistic music. Mm-hmm. But that's just something that's always, it's just in me, Sure. It's nothing that I necessarily even think about, it's a part somehow
It's
of
who you are.
Yeah. And I think, I'm 60 years old now. I'm not 25. It's something that I think is important, and I think it's part of, it's part of how I came up, and melodies, one thing I tell my students at Juilliard is I'll sit them all down and I'll say, okay, who's your favorite player? And they'll list them all, and I'll say, okay, what do they all have in common? Because this goes without saying every time. They have a sound. You may like the way they play, you may not like the way they play, you might like their style, you may not like their style, but they all have a sound, because that's the first thing that we hear, that we gravitate towards in a musician.
See, we are going to close now with another piece that's on the Thompson Fields, and this one's called Arbiters of Evolution. And in this case, the arbiters of evolution are the female birds of paradise from Papua New Guinea. So these particular birds, have any of you seen the birds of paradise online? The magnificent dances. So these birds have evolved over millions of years in crazy ways, and they say, the theory goes is that through sexual selection, there were no predators. So the females are choosing the males, and the males became kind of like a peacock, more and more ornate, and they didn't have to worry about something seeing them because they're bright yellow with an orange inside their mouth and a red crest on their head. They didn't have to worry, so they just became kind of crazier and crazier. And one of the things, it is a mystery. It does make you wonder about everything, just how it all works. But these birds can shapeshift their bodies in incredible ways, and you have to wonder how that is that evolved. So, like some of them can, all of a sudden they become like this big kind of, I don't know, it's like a big arching hood or something that it waves at the females. Some of them turn their bodies into like these half circles, and then they snap their tail, or I don't know, they make a noise that sounds like a whip. And then there's the parodias. There's several species of parodias, and they make their feathers. They have feathers that go out, and it looks just like a skirt, like a big tutu. And then they have these little feelers. The females are really quite drab. They have absolutely nothing to speak of. But the males have these feelers on their head that are like little feather knobs on the end, and they have this iridescent thing that they flash up. And so the scientists at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which is an amazing, amazing place, everybody should become a member of the Cornell Lab for fun and every other reason. And these birds, what the males do is they find a low-lying limb, and that you can see videos from the Birds of Paradise project of this. The females, they find this limb, and they all sit there in a line. And it's funny, they don't seem to fight, at least in none of the videos I saw. And the males, with their beak, they clear all the leaves, so there's a perfectly clean dance floor. And then they go beneath the females, and then they open up their feathers. And the first part of the dance is kind of like berets and ballet, like and they start doing this thing kind of like this, and they're going around like that. And then all of a sudden, he puts his legs apart, and he starts doing this thing like this. And he shakes his head, and he flashes this, and the females kind of look, and sometimes they'll all fly away except for one that will make herself available. And that's what I don't understand. Is like, what if two want that? I never saw that, but the only one I saw, one wanted it, but in one, nobody goes for it. They all leave. And then the male, you can see what a dejected bird of paradise looks like. The feathers come down, and he just slinks away like, this is just not going well at all. So anyway, I wrote this piece called not Birds of Paradise, Arbiters of Evolution, females being the arbiters of evolution, and Donnie McCaslin and Scott Robinson being magnificent as any bird of paradise.
Clarence Penn, we're glad you're here. I'm glad you're here.
I'm glad to
You'll
be
be
here.
back. Yeah?
I hope so.
You got to tell me what it feels like to play with Maria. I mean, I knew Timmy Horner, who had that chair, and I've seen some of the guys go in and out. She has very good taste, and there you go. That's why you're there.
Yeah, I saw Tim play with the band a couple of times, and I thought that was it. That was it, you know. And you know, I subbed, and you know, when she asked me to cover a couple of days that Tim couldn't do, they sent the music, and I just got a chance to. I was on tour with another band, and I was on the bus every day, and I was listening to it, man, and it's beautiful. It's really beautiful, and it you know, for me, it told me what to play and what not to play, you know, and I used that approach when I played my first gig with her, and you know, luckily she appreciated that. I didn't know if she was gonna like it. I was just being myself and playing the music, you know, how the music spoke to me.
But that's who she
yeah,
is.
yeah.
She likes organic, relaxed, no bullshit, no preconditions, don't fit into no cookie cutter, you know, make it up. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Organic and letting the music breathe and for me it was like riding a broken in horse, but a stallion, and I enjoyed it. And you know, I guess from that point on, she was like, you know, we have to play together, we have to work together. And I was doing a lot of other stuff at the time,
Sure.
and I
well,
told
you
her,
have been getting around.
I have been fortunate, and you know, I said, well, you know, if our paths cross, if I can ever help you out, you know, definitely give me a call. And she called me, you know.
Well, you know, when she likes somebody, she likes to keep them around.
Yeah, she's very
very
loyal.
loyal.
Yeah, very loyal.
And she takes ideas just as she gives ideas.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So, you know, for me, what's interesting is that it's not a regular big band. You know, I don't know if I would be interested in playing in a regular big band at this point in my career. You know, I was a classical percussion major, so
Where were you?
I went to Interlochen Arts Academy, and then I went to University of Miami,
Oh, okay.
studied with Fred Wickstrom playing timpani,
I got you.
and then playing drum set. And then during that first year, I decided, well, maybe I want to play jazz, and that's when I went to Virginia.
That explains something about your style. I would have not have thought of it, but that does make sense. Yeah. You have a big understanding of the drum kit. You know, I mean, a lot of guys play inside, you know, the framework.
Right.
And a lot of guys seem to want to tear the skins off of it.
Exactly.
And a lot of guys like, you know, to do fibrillations on the hi-hat. But you seem to use it like a kind of, it's like a paint kit or something.
Yeah.
It's that
yeah.
timpani thing.
It's exactly the timpani thing. Yep. You know, and the colors. You know, when I got Betty Carter's gig, that's what brought me to New York.
Yeah.
And she said she really liked the fact that I played with colors.
She also liked the fact that you were a young man.
Yeah, yes, of course. And she, you know, I couldn't use enough colors with her. I just, you know, she was just like more ideas, you know. So yeah, I think that helped inform the way that I play now.
Donnie McCaslin, you're one of my favorite people. You're also one of my favorite musicians. It doesn't always work that way. I have watched you on many occasions at the Monterey Jazz Festival where you seem to be much appreciated, and I think the guys who I work with there love you almost as much as I do. They bring you back a lot, and there's a good reason. Now, I want you to say a word about what it means to you to be with Maria Schneider for so long. She's an important part of your life and your career, and you are with her too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm trying to think about how to describe it. I mean, she's just such a great musician, you know, and she's such a wonderful environment in the band sonically and with her orchestrating and her writing, and it's, you know, I really appreciate how much freedom she gives the musicians, you know, with the rhythm section when we're improvising. She really encourages everybody to kind of do their thing and to stretch out and not to hold back, and then she does, you know, write for you know, the different personalities in the band and creates these great sort of frameworks for them to improvise in. And you know, I'm so impressed also with her dedication. You know, I mean, she's such a hard worker, and I just see, I guess I've been fortunate to see how, you know, she'll bring something in and then she'll revise it and she'll revise it and she'll revise it.
And she'll ask your opinions.
Yeah, and she asks for everybody's input, and she really, you know, has that real drive to like make everything the very, you know, to take it to the level that she's trying to get everything.
More than any musician I've ever known, and you know I've known a lot of musicians. People love the way you play, Donnie. Will you please explain to me, growing up playing a horn with a father who's a musician like yours and a very hip guy, and I think you said he's 90 now.
Yeah.
Still playing the piano, how you found your voice, your confidence, your chops, well, growing, evolving over these many years. As you would plot that out, how does that look or feel to you?
I think it's you know, it's been a process, and you know, I guess the first thing was once I started playing, I was 12 years old, and it was kind of on a whim. But I think the thing that really presented itself, the real attraction for me was self-expression with improvising, and I think that was just drew me in right away, even though I had very limited ability. And my parents were divorced, and my father would drive to where I lived, and he would kind of haul his Wurlitzer piano up to this barn that was out back of the house that I lived, and it was like a little redwood grove, and behind that was a barn, and he would set it up, and he would comp for me, and you know, it was, yeah, so I was 12 years old, and you know, I'd get frustrated easily, so sometimes we'd play for 5 minutes, and I'd want to stop, and other times it seemed like we would play for hours on end. And it was very selfless of him. I mean, one thing too is he would always just comp, you know, for me. We'd play the melody, you know. The first song I learned was Tequila. And then
It has a hook.
it has a hook, you know, and it kind of went from there, and he was just, you know, he would just comp for me over and over, chorus after chorus.
He wanted you to be a musician.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the thing he always told me was, you know, the musician's life is a difficult one, but it's something that you do if you really, you know, if you really want to do it. And it was apparent to me pretty quickly that it was something I wanted to do. And again, looking back on it, now I think it was that opportunity to express my feelings in a way that I hadn't been able to do prior to that point.
McCaslin, Scott Robinson, all these beautiful musicians. Thank you so much.
Trombones, Keith, Ryan, Marshall, George. Up there on the trumpets, Mike, Greg, Najee, Jonathan. Down here you got Rich Perry, Dave Pietro, Steve Wilson, Donnie McCaslin, this crazy, wonderful guy, Scott Robinson, right here. There's Jay Anderson back there with his buddy Clarence Penn. There's Lagi Lun on the guitar. My man Garrett there, Sache. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Frank Kimbrough. Frank Kimbrough. Now, some of you is all hip enough to know that on occasion we take a hankering to somebody or a bunch of bodies. You guys are a bunch of bodies. They're beautiful bodies. So we have for our dear Maria Schneider the latest entry into our Jazz Monsters Hall of Fame. Yeah, these are the monsters. She's the angel.
If you work the music like that, you practice with the musicians, you get them to understand, they play it long enough that they internalize it and they know now the body of sound they want to create. So if you have 18 musicians that know that now, and then you have a night where it just clicks with everybody, that's powerful stuff.
Oh, yes.